through the so-called solar wind, which carries charged particles from the atmosphere of the sun close to our planet. And if that increases, in other words, if you have a solar storm, the effects are instantly felt on Earth as well, where you'll have increased auroral activity. Now, all you need basically to produce some super high-energy auroras would be just to have a massive storm taking place on the sun. And of course, again, you could ask, why would that happen? Why would it not happen? Basically, we've been studying science proper only for a couple of centuries.
Yeah.
I think we probably haven't been long around enough to have any reasonable idea about the frequency of such potential events. So as a working scenario, I do believe this is probably the most economic scenario we could think of. Then there's a second possibility, intruders in the solar system. What would be the effects exactly of a massive disintegrating comet arriving into the solar system, for instance? And this is basically the scenario Kloop and Napier, two renowned cometologists, have been working on. And they have hypothesized that a massive comet entered into the solar system, I think about 10,000 years ago now, on the latest model.
Really?
And if that would fall apart within the inner solar system, once again, you would probably be looking at some very intense auroral effects or side effects of that, which haven't really been studied or, to satisfaction yet. So, intruders in the solar system, increased solar weather. I think those two options are the most feasible ones at present.
Okay, yeah. Okay, you mentioned 10,000 potentially BC. I've been following a little bit some of these stories lately from different sources in regards to science magazines online and others, of course. But it seems to be that they recognize that there have been some kind of planetary upheaval, so to speak, in the past. Everything from large explosions in the sky, basically from a comet, as you said, or that actually a planet in some sense has actually come in and wrecked another planet, and things have been happening in that regard. But so far as I understand it, they always place the timeline of these things very far back, meaning that potentially man wasn't even around at that time. So do you think that either their timeline is off, or maybe these aren't the same events that they are talking about as you are talking about here?
Yeah, chronology is obviously key to many of these questions. I think one thing we would need to get out of the way is the idea that creation myths have anything to do with the real origins of the universe. And of course, this is a figment of Western thought that we've been living with for a long time. My profound opinion at this point, based on the data I've looked at, is that creation stories as relayed by traditional human societies aren't really dealing with the actual origins of the universe, things in terms of Big Bang scenarios and the like, steady-state universe. They have nothing to do with these topics. I think what creation myth is really all about is a series of catastrophic disruptions in the recent history of the Earth. So let's say Holocenic events, perhaps Pleistocenic, but within the past 10 or 15,000 years, close enough in time to us for these societies to have remembered many details accurately, and for the fear to have survived so dramatically as we see it in ancient societies. So I think the feeling you get when looking at the rituals and the stories about creation is that there's such an intensity of experience that it's something quite recent. And if you take on board the widely spread ancient claim that history is cyclical and that there are cosmic cycles of Earth destruction and renewal, then everything really begins to fall into place. And my guess would be, and I'm not the first person to claim this, is that the stories of creation now are about the latest in a series of catastrophic disruptions we've experienced on Earth. Now, I think that answers or potentially answers much of the chronological trouble.
Right.
In that you could at the same time maintain the reality claim of creation myth, and also you would also dispense with the need for revisions of chronology. So everything would stay in place, basically. And Yeah, creation, I believe, has little to do with the actual origins of the universe. I think that is a vital key.
Sure, exactly. And because before you mentioned a little bit about the cycles too, and in regards also to why an event would take place that causes a more active sky, so to speak. And my idea kind of went back to the Mayan calendar, actually, where they describe similar cycles, that the sun is kind of is dying and is reborn in a constant cycle, and for whatever reason that might have a larger astronomical background to it, why that actually happens. At this point, I guess we don't know why that would be. But do you think that
I would say the figures ancient societies have put on those cycles aren't necessarily correct. For one thing, they all contradict each other. But I think what really stands out is that most ancient societies of which we know anything have expressed belief in such systems. And they have claimed that the world is occasionally destroyed through fire, through floods, and through similar upheavals.
Yeah.
And they have detailed memories of those events. And I think that, as a mythical archetype, is just a major pointer.
Exactly.
So I'm not too sure it will be a successful venture to look at figures and try and calculate just when the previous episode was finished or when the next catastrophe will happen. Also because a lot of later generations of more scholarly-minded astronomers in ancient societies have labored with those figures and adjusted them. In the classical world, for example, Greek philosophers from Plato down to the Neoplatonists have offered many different figures for the length of the so-called great year. And all planets are aligned on in one line. They all disagreed, and I think we just shouldn't spend too much time on the exact figures. But it's the big picture theory that really counts. And that's the one that goes back far in time.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. That we shouldn't stare ourselves blind, so to speak, on the numbers that much. But the idea of the
very earliest Egyptian texts we have already look forward to or anticipate a destruction of the world, a doomsday event, when everything will become again like it was in the days of creation, when there will be darkness again, and the god Atum will be turned into a primordial serpent again, and so on and so on. So this has been in place for at least 5,000 years.
And the question is, if they were recording like the Maya again, if we were to return to them, if they were recording these kind of cycles, that do you think that would imply in regards to their mythology that they have been around for that long, or does this imply that they themselves might just have been calculating and trying to figure out when these cycles occur and reoccur, so to speak?
I would probably say the latter. Because I think we need to take a forensic approach to mythology. If a claim is made to antiquity, we need to look at the actual hard evidence we have in our hands. And in the majority of cases, we don't have any tangible evidence that chronological systems, calendars, were in place, let's say, at 5,000 BC or 10,000 BC. There's just some so-called oracle bones in China on which people kept the dates of lunar months. But there's no real good evidence for long-term calendars from a very early time. So I would be careful with those dating systems and be inclined to believe that much of it was retrocalculated. According to the Maya system of chronology, for instance, the world was created in 3,113 BC.
Right.
Who knows? I think the jury is probably still out on that. People may actually have begun counting at that very date. By the same token, or it's also possible that a later generation has actually back-calculated this date and set up the system from there. The same vein that the Christian calendar, for instance, was only really taken into use in the 7th century AD.
That's right, exactly, and I guess that would imply more mythology. I mean, the Maya, again, if they're talking about the renewal of the sun as the kind of central point in their calendar, then this potentially could imply then that there was a very active sun or a very, not such an active sun basically, but that this happens again in cycles and that this potentially could return at some point. Who knows, right?
And ancient societies, needless to say, did not necessarily pinpoint the sun as the cause of these effects. What we basically learn from ancient traditions is, the one message we learn is that the sky was entirely different than it's now. Over and over again, we are told that at that time the sun didn't shine yet, and there was no moon, and there were no stars. It was just darkness. And then this world column arose. The first event of creation was the formation of this gigantic sky pillar. And that actually functioned as the first light in an otherwise dark universe. And it was only after the breakup of that cosmic tree, that cosmic mountain, that the world was first lit, that the first day began, and the sun and moon were put into place. So this is actually the one message you get when you look at ancient creation myths. It shouldn't be taken literally. We should just put ourselves in the position of the ancient storytellers, look through their eyes, because they are just describing what they saw on the screen of the sky, as it were, without any scientific or astronomical knowledge.
Right.
So when they speak about the absence of the sun and the moon in that sky, all we need to ask is, could there have been a scientific mechanism that would have made the sun and the moon invisible to see for a prolonged time?
What do you think about that?
Obviously.
Excuse me, what do you say?
That would depend on the scientific scenario you would use to explain your data. But I do believe from the literature that in the wake of a massive comet disintegration, for instance,
right,
the interior of the solar system would be dusted to such an event that the light of the sun could be blocked out effectively for a long time. There is another possibility: auroras, very intense auroras, of the type we are studying in our present investigations. They may also have the capacity to blot out the light of the surrounding stars. Say, if you're looking at this incredibly luminous column, then it may have been so bright that the stars were far too faint to be seen, the actual stars.
Fascinating.
But this is something that would need to be studied by specialists in the field, and it's incredibly complicated, I'm told, as well. The mathematics are just complicated beyond belief, so this is not an easy question to answer.
All right.
But I have obtained the impression that we can quite trust the recurrent themes in ancient traditions. We can put a great store of faith by messages such as these. The very claim that there was a time that the sun and the moon weren't seen is just one of the most common archetypes in world mythology, and I do believe we have to take it very seriously.
And what do you think what were they trying to communicate there? Do you think that this was because of this very bright light of the auroras, or do you think that this could have potentially been a large massive kind of solar system upheaval, meaning that the sun actually was kind of blotted out, that we couldn't see it?
That's actually outside my expertise, but it's important to point out that plasmas aren't always visible to the naked human eye. Plasmas come in various states depending on the intensity of the electric current that goes through them. And it's only when they enter glow mode or arc mode that they become visible to the human eye as well. So you're looking at lightnings and auroras. So a plasma column could in theory have existed very well without being visible to the human eye. So during the period of darkness the ancients are talking about, we could claim that there was a dusty plasma surrounding the Earth that wasn't in glow mode, that wasn't in visible mode. Whether that would also be opaque enough to block out the light of the sun and the moon, I'd love to know the answer to that question, but I don't know, and I'm hoping future research will tell. It's important to note that many of the findings of plasma physics we are using in our work are quite recent. Many of these discoveries were only made during the 90s, or even